So I guess the latest news is that Vladimir Putin is threatening to nuke the West, saying we can hit their territory. Basically, he gave the speech where he was like, what is NATO thinking? We have nuclear weapons and we will use them on you. All right, baby. World War III. I think there's a strong potential that by November, we may be looking at mass mobilization. Strong possibility. Calm down. I'm not saying 70%. I'm just saying it is in the realm of physical reality that this occurs. You've got people like Chuck Schumer saying we must win in Ukraine. You've got Macron saying if we must, we will deploy NATO troops into Ukraine. You've got the NATO chief saying Ukraine will be in NATO. And Russia saying if you do this, we have nukes. Did you forget? Outright saying, hey, war, baby. The first thing I think will happen, and this news may be shocking to a lot of people, but it's going to be grains of sand slowly, incrementally, is the use of tactical battlefield nuclear weapons. I've had people say, like, Tim, why would Russia do that? Well, to win. However, there's a strong possibility that the West will use nuclear artillery, lower yield, but still massive. Maybe we're talking the 100 kiloton range, because Ukraine is losing, and they're losing very, very badly. Now, all the propaganda in the world, Western propaganda saying like, oh, Russia's being defeated. They're not. You look at the battlefield maps and you see Russia is advancing. They are securing the territories they want to secure, and Ukrainian forces are being decimated. Ukraine is conscripting 50-year-old men and young women. Don't tell me they're winning. So when you hear that, and then Macron says, we'll send in the troops if we have to, it's coming. Putin is threatening the destruction of civilization and chilling warning to nuke the West, says GB News. I want to show you this headline real quick from the Mirror. Ukraine must win the war by November, or Putin could start World War III, warn ex-military chiefs. I wonder what would happen. If the United States was dragged into World War III over Ukraine, I think this country would be facing itself some kind of civil war. I think we're already in a cold civil war. It's not my opinion. I didn't come up with that. And everyone, says, oh, Tim Pool's talking about civil war again. Here we go. But just give me the scenario. What do you think happens that just before the election, Joe Biden enters the United States into a ground war in Ukraine, mobilizing troops? World War III? What will the American people do? And what to do with these 10 plus million criminal aliens who have entered the country? Let's start here from GB News. Vladimir Putin has issued yet another chilling threat about nuclear war during his speech to Russia's Federal Assembly this morning. Putin warned the West that there is a genuine risk of an enormous conflict if they opt to send their own troops to join Ukrainian soldiers in the ex-Soviet state. Mind you, there already are U.S. personnel on the ground. The Russian president also claimed Moscow has weapons capable of striking targets across the West. They're called MIRVs. And that's an ancient technology by today's standards. Yes, the multiple independently targeting re-entry vehicle, a single intercontinental ballistic missile that can go up into space and then deploy 12 warheads. Now, each one of these warheads could then independently target different cities along the eastern seaboard. 12. But the strategy for MIRVs is usually to pepper one city and just flatten it. The warheads will detonate in the sky above you. So it's funny, whenever you see these artistic depictions of nuclear explosions, you see the mushroom cloud on the ground go up. That is not how nuclear bombs work. They are programmed, they are primed to detonate in midair to maximize the spread of the blast radius. The blast on the ground will be blocked by ground terrain and buildings and structures. Detonating it in the air allows it to sweep downward over everything, flattening everything. Imagine 12 of those hitting your city in rapid succession. I don't know that that's where it goes to start. I don't know that we see something like that this year. But even this image showing nuclear bomb shows a ground explosion with a mushroom cloud going up. Putin continued to accuse the West of being hell-bent on weakening Russia ahead of next month's presidential election. I actually believe the intention of NATO is to invade Russia outright and to destroy the country. I I think Russia gets the Ukraine treatment. I don't know that it will happen. I'm not saying anyone has come out and said it's going to happen. I think NATO interests are in destroying Russia. That's why we are lining up on the border. He said, Western nations must realize that we also have weapons that can hit targets on their territory. All of this really threatens a conflict with the use of nuclear weapons and the destruction of civilization. Don't they get that? Putin also claimed that NATO forces are preparing to strike our territory. The Russian president, who argued Russophobia, I love that. That's come on, blinds people and deprives them of their rational faculties. Without Russia, there is no solid peace in this world. He is seeking re-election, of course. Putin's claim about Russia operating as a global peacemaker comes shortly after the second anniversary of the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine. Russia also annexed parts of the ex-Soviet state in 2014, this we know, Crimea. However, the latest incursion into Ukraine has triggered Moscow's worst diplomatic crisis since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Western nations have responded by clubbing together, particularly NATO. Oh, that's interesting. Here's a bunch of heads of state from NATO and Volodymyr Zelensky. It's all lies. They are lying to us every single day. They will bring Ukraine into NATO. Russia will have no choice. He will escalate. My fear is this. Russia's playing it pretty close to the chest. Their mission, their plan, it's Ukraine. NATO's is more expansive than that. My fear is that NATO initiates a false flag attack, triggering a casus belli, or creating their casus belli. Look at the Nord Stream bombing. Why would Russia blow up their own pipeline? They call Russia a gas station with nukes. It's selling energy to Europe. Why would they blow up their own pipeline? It makes no sense. But that's what the media in the West said. Oh, Russia blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. It's theirs. Why? Probably not. Bloomberg writes, if you think World War III is unimaginable, read this. Novelists and filmmakers have long developed alternative histories of major conflicts that should serve as warnings for complacent Americans. Are you preparing? Serious question. Have you done any prep work? I'm not saying build a bunker and stuff beans in it. Have you even downloaded to your phone survival and first aid guides? I've got 4 or 5 different ones, and I've got them stored on multiple devices. Have you done anything to prepare for an emergency? Do you have any extra fuel? Do you have generators? Do you have solar panels? If not, why not? Seriously. I always say this. We've got first aid kits, right? Where is yours? I talk to most people, they don't even know where their first aid kit is. They're like, I don't know, under the bathroom sink or something. You never use it. Do you really think you're going to slice your arm open and need a first aid kit and bandage or anything like that? No. But you buy it anyway because maybe it happens. Do you have a bug out bag? It's really wild. People don't even have bug out bags, okay? We've got a lot of them. And we actually bought a bunch because there's like pre-made ones that have certain things. But you want shoes, you want a change of clothes, you want maybe like some protein bars that last for a long time, a bottle of water, a flashlight. Look up good bug out bags. Why? Is it because maybe the world ends? No, it's because sometimes people's houses start on fire. You're sitting in your bedroom, a fire starts. Smoke alarm goes off. Get out of the house now. What do? Run out barefoot? Well, if you have a bug out bag, because sometimes there are fires, you grab your bag. It's got a portable battery charger in it. It's got some food in it. It's got a list of emergency contacts if your phone dies. And then you're outside with everything you need. And if it really does get bad and you can't go back in your house, you've got a change of clothes, a pair of shoes, socks, underwear, flashlight, utility tools, a Leatherman perhaps, and you are going to be infinitely better off than the average person. Here we go. Are we unable to imagine defeat? You might have thought that having so recently lost a small war, Americans would have no difficulty picturing the consequences of losing a large one. But the humiliating abandonment of Afghanistan in 2021 has been consigned with remarkable swiftness to the collective memory hole. Well, the question really is, if we are to lose World War III, what happens to our country domestically? I'm not as worried there because we got a lot of guns. But it could mean, and likely will mean, your standard of living will collapse. people in cities. We won't be able to sustain the population levels we have. Will the news networks replay Biden's Kiev speech the night the Russians march into the Ukrainian capital? Or will one of them air Tucker Carlson's next interview with Russian President Vladimir Putin? And how will we react if, say, later this year, we are informed that Iran has successfully built a nuclear weapon and has unleashed its proxy in Lebanon, Hezbollah, to rain missiles down on Israel? Yada, 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 yada. We're having fun here. Putin's closest ally is prepping for World War III, Belarus. It's happening. From the New York Times. For Europe and NATO, a Russian invasion is no longer unthinkable. The West has begun the propaganda over the past few months and the debates that Russia is going to invade Europe. Why would Russia do that? That's not a good thing for Russia to do. It does not serve their interests. It makes no sense. What does make sense is Western forces enter Ukraine, quietly perhaps. Russia then says this is an act of war against Russia and declares war. NATO then lies and says, we don't have troops. This is Putin's lie. Who do you trust? Putin just says, NATO troops have deployed to Ukraine, declaring war. We will retaliate. NATO forces says, we've never deployed troops into Ukraine. Putin is lying. This is what we warned you all about. Pick your poison. Amid crumbling U.S. support for Ukraine and Donald Trump's rising candidacy, European nations and NATO are making plans to take on Russia by themselves. So I decided to look into what the preppers think. And I came across this thread on Reddit. This one's really interesting. Very interesting. So this is a post on Reddit. Preppers. World War III possible within the next few years? Asks one user 1 month ago. Given the recent saber rattling by NATO, etc., what are the chances of war with Russia happening within the next 3 to 5 years? In the UK, they recently had an army general float the idea of conscription. Wow. Which seems to have unanimously been rejected by the public, and talks of a pre-war generation being utilized to scaremonger. If they were to start a war with Russia, it's likely, given the recent backlash against their ideas for boosting numbers, that they would likely force the public's hand. I personally think that we are only a short few years from this becoming a reality. What do others feel about the current political tensions and the possibility of World War III? Let me just read a few of the interesting comments. One person says, plenty of gray, deniable activities taking place even now. Have you seen the books, There's a War Going On, but Nobody Can See It? Cyber warfare is a thing, and I understand that's happening even now. That's right. Russia is certainly taking action, and so is the U.S., and these are deniable actions to hinder the opponent before a full-scale mobilization starts. The next user says we are in the Cold War. It never stopped. Everyone just took a lunch break. In the Cold War, World War III could break out at any time. So it's likely going to be that going on, duck and cover videos coming back. One user, the messaging in the UK is getting kind of weird. The last week or so, there has been a lot of talk about conscription. Today, the Times did an article about paying gap year students to join the armed forces. And then this interesting comment. It's not verified. It's just a comment on Reddit, so it could be meaningless, but I find it interesting nonetheless. One user says, no jokes aside, I work for the military for a training squadron. We are prepping the military for war with systems that we have never flown or utilized before because they want all aircraft ready in combat status. If this doesn't mean the U.S. is prepping for a major war, then I don't know what. But my gut's telling me something big is coming and that we need to be ready because you never know where and how far it could spread if it does take place. Interesting. Fair point. A user says 0. Nobody wants that. No matter how much they bluster, nobody wins. I don't think so. I don't think that simply because people don't want war won't happen. Putin is coming out saying, no, we don't want this. NATO is saying, no, please help. No. But both sides refuse to stop the actions that are driving this problem. Do you want to decide who you think is at fault? It's meaningless. Vladimir Putin needs Crimea. Crimea has their naval base in Sevastopol. They need access to the Black Sea, and that's how they do it. Unfortunately, there's only one weak bridge connecting Crimea, to Russia, so they needed the Donbass region, creating a land bridge into Crimea, allowing them to secure this region more fiercely. The U.S. NATO Western forces wanted Ukraine to join the European Union and NATO putting almost every nation on Russia's border, making them a NATO nation. Vladimir Putin said no. This results ultimately in conflict within the state of Ukraine, the country, the ousting of their president Yanukovych, and eventually Russia begins preparing for war. Why? With Ukraine falling to Western powers, the risk that Russia would lose access to the Black Sea was becoming a reality. Russia would not tolerate that, so they supported separatists and decided to move in and secure the land bridge and Crimea. Now, you could argue they shouldn't have done it. Russia was losing the soft power battle. But then whose fault is it? It doesn't matter. I just don't see it mattering. Russia's not going to back down and let Western forces take Crimea. They're going to take it. So a quote-unquote referendum was held. Russia never invaded. They simply walked out of their own naval base and said, hello, we're here. They were there the whole time. But if Ukraine was planning on joining up with NATO and the EU, that was going to basically end the Russian Black Sea Fleet. So Russia takes the Donbass. The West does not want Russia to secure this. They want to shut them out and shut down Russia's ability to sell fuel, and they want to weaken their ability to do so, hence Burisma. And so, war. Now, many, the default liberals in this country and deep statists will say things like, it's Russia's fault for invading. It's an unjust, unprovoked war, blah, blah, blah. That's meaningless. Vladimir Putin is not some cartoon villain, one-dimensional, I'm going to take over Ukraine and then Poland is next. That makes no sense. What makes sense is, as we described, what's going on. Will NATO allow Russia to take this? No, I think NATO wants to actually invade Russian territory and crush Vladimir Putin and shut him down. Oh, boy. That brings us to America. Forbes says, no, Joe Biden isn't bringing back the draft despite viral rumors. The draft never left. They just haven't used it. The draft still exists. Selective service still exists. And they could call upon the draft whenever. So when they say he isn't bringing the draft back, they're basically saying he has not pressed the red button. The function of the draft still exists. Biden need only say, you are being drafted. Why would he do that now before a war has actually started? Here's what I think. As recruitment numbers dwindle, we've gotten this story from a couple weeks ago. Migrants who serve in U.S. military can expedite path to citizenship, new bill proposes. That's right. They say, these two guys, we have a problem. Unfettered illegal immigration and failing recruitment numbers. I know. How about we build American culture and support those who want to support this country? Instead, it's looking like they're going to take these non-citizens, train them to be soldiers, and dispatch them into World War III, baby. Maybe they'll be sent in as like a NATO coalition force, and they won't be under the command of the United States, but under the command of NATO, and they'll invade Ukraine. I made that joke. I was like, take all these illegal immigrants and just send them to Ukraine. They can fight the war. How about that? They must have taken it seriously and said, that's exactly what we're going to do. Either way, it opens the door for Vladimir Putin to say, you've forced our hand. Understand this. Vladimir Putin was the first person to invade, right? NATO may have been putting pressures on Russia, but Russia made that invasion happen. It is entirely plausible, nay possible, that this war gets to the point where Vladimir Putin says, enough. Fire the nukes. And people need to understand, I am not talking about ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. I'm talking about tactical nuclear artillery. Western forces move in, begin crushing Russian forces in the Donbass. Russia announces a strategic retreat. And then a 100-kiloton bomb drops, wiping out thousands of Western forces. The West then says, Vladimir Putin has declared nuclear war, blah, blah, blah. There's something to consider. The UK sent depleted uranium tank busters to Ukraine. Russia said, you have just started the nuclear war because this is a radioactive munitions. So as far as Russia's concerned, they already fired the first tactical radioactive weapons, creating the door for nuclear combat or opening the door for it. Putin's going to come out and say, they launched first. We are just responding in kind. And the West will say, absurd. Russia launched first. we're responding in kind. So by all means, say, nobody wants this war, so it'll never happen. I have seen all too many times things happening that nobody wanted, but it's snowball rolling down a hill. It's dominoes falling. What can you do? Just stop participating, I suppose. I believe that if we elect Donald Trump, Trump might actually just say to Putin, I don't care about Ukraine, bye. And then Putin says, okay, I guess the war's over. And that's it. No nuclear annihilation. No war in Europe. Just the end. Russia takes the Donbass and Crimea. Ukraine stops fighting. And that's it. We have Israel to contend with. The Houthi rebels, Hamas, that's a problem as well. But I hope that come November, we don't have war and Donald Trump can get elected and there's an opportunity for him to shut this stuff down before we all die. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.